Teachers of Reddit, what is a secret you don't want your students to know? After meeting your parents, 90% of the time I think the apple didn't fall far from the tree. It's not necessarily good or bad, but you're probably more like your parents than you realize. When I say I've been too busy to grade their tests, it's almost always bullshit. We could tell when one of our professors was actually getting laid. Took him 3 days to grade assignments instead of 1. I had a teacher who was always kind of an emotional wreck. One day she comes in cheery and wearing a bright colored dress and didn't have anything graded. We knew. I occasionally pray for some students not to show up to give myself half of a chance that day. Legitimate prayers. I have wished for kids to fall into comas, get mono, some non-lethal whatever illness, to keep them from my classes because either they were A, so distracting it dragged the whole class down, or B, just little jerks. I'll let you in on a little secret. Every adult you've ever known was a kid at some time in his life. You think we don't remember summer vacation? Riding our bikes down the creek? Catching pollywogs in a jar? Camping out under the stars? Some days, I sit there in my office, looking out at you kids in the playground, and I think, they don't know how good they got it. In a few years, they are all going to be grown-ups like me, and all those good times will be memories for them. 2. Principal Prickly. For helper tasks, taking lunch count, attendance to office, etc. We choose badly behaved kids, not well behaved ones. Gives us a break from them, and gives them less time destroying things in the classroom. I have a friend who was, and still is, a little maniac. And her teachers would make her their special helper and have her run notes to other teachers several times a day. The notes just said, "Pass it on." So they'd all just send her back and forth to keep her busy. It made her feel happy and special, and she thought it was hilarious when she found out the truth years later. I really don't want them knowing I still live with my mum. Some of my students have already moved out of their parents' place. I'd lose all sense of authority if they knew. On most homework assignments, we spend maybe 30 seconds grading each one. We have trained ourselves to look for certain keywords in each assignment and also length. Frankly, it is mind-numbing and very repetitive work. Very boring, and most people aren't that different. I used to work at a British university which had a ridiculous rubric for grading. There were probably 40 to 50 different factors to consider, and each received a percentage which would then be calculated to make the final grade. After a few years I just started doing it backwards. I was grading final bachelor's theses. I'd read the paper, think about my interactions with the student, and then just come up with a number, 64% for instance. Remember British system, so nobody gets over a 75. Then I jot down a ton of percentages which I thought would basically average out to 64%. The funny thing is that all these grades have to be moderated, which means you've got to get together with other teachers and talk about why Amanda got a 64% and where you thought she failed or shined. I was within a few percentage points of everyone's grades without ever even thinking about the rubric. I tell my second graders that I can tell if they are lying by reading their tongues. I catch a couple kids in some flat out lies in the beginning of the year, and then they buy into it. Eventually, the liars refuse to stick out their tongues, and my initial lie does the work for me. My second grade teacher said this too. She said she can also tell the nose pickers by the size of their nostrils. Mrs. Stauffer. Later MRS. Prain. At the beginning of each course, I have to memorize a lot of names in a very short period of time. Usually I do this by making notes next to each name in my attendance list. Some of said notes could probably get me fired if anyone found out. Recent examples include Asian Pit Stains and Skinny Drew Carey. If someone, or something, doesn't remind me that I assigned homework, I probably won't remember at least half of the time. I absolutely have favorite students. And I also have students who make me praise the heavens that I never have to see them again when they leave class for the last time. If you don't make my life and job any harder than they have to be, I'm more likely to be lenient and helpful. The reverse is true, too. I walk in unprepared and totally wing lessons way more often than my students know. There is about a 90% chance that whatever fun, creative grammar game we played any given week was actually pulled out of my ass on the drive to work that morning. Before I started dating their French teacher, I was hooking up with their math teacher. A year before that I was with their grade 6 teacher. No, a kindergarten teacher. She says the whole school, grades K-6, is drama packed with teachers hooking up with each other and parents so much it should be a reality show. I'd watch that. As a soccer coach, I have to hide the fact that as a former player, I was everything in the opposite of what I preach and teach. Everything. Well, I guess that's why you preach the opposite. You know what it's like to be trouble and you want them to avoid making the same mistakes. If anything, that helps validate what you're teaching. I think this is what you meant. One of my teachers has banned dabbing in her classroom but does it all the time herself. Most of the decisions I make aren't truly my own, and are simply made by the Board of Ed. Most of the time I hate the way I have to teach and want them to know we are on the same page that this sucks. That, unfortunately, yes. More than half the things I teach you will not use in real life. But we have to teach to the exam. Sorry. I started to like school towards the end. I just began to enjoy knowledge for the sake of it. It's a good thing to be educated. Whether or not you think it's important to know calculus, know the history of your country, or know how the organs in your body function and so on. These things change the way people think. Especially maths. Teaches you to be more logically minded, and I feel too many kids have the opinion that what they learn is useless. Embrace knowledge. And take an active interest in learning. It really makes the world better. That's it for my rant. They think we don't know how to party. I prefer it stays that way. Especially when I teach grades that are old enough to go out. I don't want them to see me pretty drunk showing off my best stripper moves on a dance floor. And I don't want to see theirs. Edit, a few typo. We talk hella shit behind closed doors. During my ill-fated first year in a B.Ed we got warned about this multiple times before practicum. Talking shit event is fine ho. But staff lounges can be dens of negativity at times just because of how much there is. Dropped out due to mental health issues and trying to figure things out now. But if I go back I can't see myself spending much time in the lounges. I get dragged down too easily. That while appearing to be a very high functioning academic, I was in fact a hard drinking, pot smoking, rock and roll playing madman. I had many roles on the campus I worked at. And most people didn't know what I did in my spare time. Other teachers included. There are dumb questions. If you shine a flashlight into a fish tank, does the light get wet? How come dolphins live in the water if they breathe oxygen? Why is the moon following me? I've long suspected that teachers actually have home lives and do not in fact only exist within the school itself. I can't prove this theory, of course, but I feel it. I know all your secrets. You aren't as quiet or subtle as you think. I know which teachers you like and dislike. Which boy you have a crush on. The unfortunate and often disturbing details of your sex life. What you did on the weekend. And some rather depressing details of your home life. Pretty much all of it is interesting. Most of it funny. Some of it soul crushing. How much I actually hate my job. When I do not having someone look over my shoulder and critiquing my every action. I love what I do because I'm good at it. Sadly those times are becoming few and far between as education becomes less about having students learn and more about having them walk away with a mark. It is a system that is destroying the creative, enabling the lazy, and encouraging the mediocre to remain so. There are days when I truly wonder if I would have been happier as a lawyer than one of those selfish bastards succeeds at something they have been struggling with and sincerely thank me and I'm back at work the next day. That time I said I didn't grade your test because I was too busy tired? Yeah. I was actually raiding with my guild. So many. Let me make a list. For reference. I teach first grade. 1. I definitely have favorites. I definitely don't dislike anyone. Which is nice. But some stand out more than most. 2. I am softer on the dummies. Okay. Dummies isn't a nice term. But I feel more compassion for the slower kids. 3. I do try to fix the books. By this I mean, I try to make it so that everyone wins at something throughout the year so no one is sad. 4. I definitely care if they like me. If a kid says they don't like me, I totally try to play it cool and say I am here to teach, not to make friends. Secretly, I die a little inside and am usually thinking about it all week long. 5. I am bluffing about telling your parents. Usually tattling on your parents is a waste of time. Where do you think you got that attitude from? It's a total bluff. My grades were shit and I failed most of my GCSE exams. Luckily, us colleges don't care about your grades in your first 2 years of high school. I now teach GCSE economics. I never even took GCSE economics. Fake it till you make. I tell my kids how shitty of a student I was. I nearly didn't graduate and only needed one class my senior year. I tell them how many colleges I was rejected from and how yes things worked out okay for me but it was much harder having to recover from my poor HS GPA. And would have been even harder not having a diploma at all. No longer a teacher. But you have no idea how easy it is to get a teaching degree in the US. There are almost certainly teachers in any given school who skated through college but really shouldn't be qualified to teach. I lost my virginity in my high school bathroom. My mom's a teacher. And she has favorite students. Edit, this is probably not a secret. But teachers don't really admit it. I had a uni professor tell us on the first day that he had favorite and unfavorite students and that if he didn't like you, no matter how well you actually did, he would fail you just because he didn't like you. Someone in the class brought it up with the head of the department. Only because this class was required for 2 or 3 different programs and therefore failing it meant either having to take it over and over, and, of course, that one guy was the only person who ever taught it, or dropped the program. I agreed with her logic of yes. This is how life works. But in this particular instance I'm going to itch about it. The head of the department, it turned out, hates the prof for it. But since the prof has been there longer than anybody else in the department there's nothing that can be done about it. You just have to figure out how to make him hate someone else. Not a teacher. But I have known a few in and out of school. When I was in high school my US history teacher often came into school late. I was in his first period class and would be all over the place when he arrived. Or just keep to his desk and ask us to humor his migraines. He was a nice guy. Actually made an effort to teach us something. But someone I'd assume is a flake in his day-to-day life. After high school I'd run into him at the store. Or see him wandering into the road or parking lot in front of cars. He even almost ran me and my nephew over when we were crossing in a crosswalk and he was behind the wheel. I'd heard he was a pothead when I was still in school, from some older cousins of mine, but never really knew what his deal was. Later on, he ended up working as an assistant to a maintenance guy at the low-income slum in the middle of town. Another of his former students told me about a situation where he was witnessed by my former classmate trying to buy prescription drugs for him and some tweaker chick from his former student. College professor here. When I say I want to get some other people into the conversation, I'm not doing it to get varied class participation and make the class more student-centered. I just want the kid who never shuts the duck up to shut the duck up. Seriously kid. I get it. You have opinions. Try shoving some of them up your ass and see how that feels. This isn't your one-man show. And the stakes aren't that particularly high. I'm not a teacher but I took an English class in college and after the first few essays I noticed my score was a constant 95. At the end of the semester my teacher admitted once she knew a student did good work she only read the introduction. I want to know if that was a one-time thing or do teachers do this pretty frequently. If you cannot speak in complete coherent sentences, but the paper you turn in reads like a college textbook, you're going to get busted for plagiarism. You don't need to be Hemingway. Just do your own damned work. And don't copy the paper of the student who sits next to you. I know where you sit and it's a total BS move when your paper is the same word for word as your buddy. Your class participation grade is not just how many questions you ask. It's whether you're paying attention. Put down your damned phone and at least pretend to be interested. Full stop. When the test is printed into colors, it doesn't mean there are two versions of the test. We want you to think that so you are less likely to cheat. I keep track of which students to make sure I am never alone with for safety concerns. There really are students out there that you know are going to hurt people badly one day when they are older and bigger. I teach middle school and elementary school, and am very grateful that I don't teach high school. Most of what we say are empty threats, calling parents, going to the principal, write-ups. Either the administration won't do anything, we don't want to do the paperwork, or we haven't done enough paperwork to get anything done. I didn't grade any of my students' final exams. Just gave them whatever grade they had on their class at that point. Poor kids who almost had the next letter grade and studied really hard.